Choose $1 million or one night with me, the powerful CEO hissed. But when the broke single dad said no, the truth his little boy whispered next shattered the entire room. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The evening rush at Joe's Diner brought its usual chaos of clattering plates and sizzling grills. Ethan Miller moved between tables with practiced efficiency, his blue uniform showing signs of a long day's work. His shoulders ached from hours of carrying heavy trays, but he kept a gentle smile on his tired face. In the corner booth, Luke sat hunched over his math homework, his pencil tapping against the worn tabletop. The 9-year-old's backpack rested beside him, decorated with superhero pins that caught the diner's fluorescent lights. Every few minutes, Ethan would glance over at his son, their eyes meeting in a shared look of understanding. "Order up," called Jerry from the kitchen window, sliding 2 plates of steaming meatloaf onto the counter. Ethan grabbed the plates and headed toward table 6, where a man in an expensive suit sat checking his watch impatiently. The customer's gold cufflinks gleamed as he drummed his fingers on the table. "Finally," the man muttered, not looking up from his phone. "I've been waiting forever." "I apologize for the delay, sir," Ethan said, carefully setting down the plates. "Can I get you anything else?" The man in the suit looked up, his face twisted with contempt. "You could try being competent at your job. Some of us have important meetings to get to, not that you'd understand that." From his corner booth, Luke watched the exchange, his homework forgotten. Ethan felt his son's eyes on him and took a deep breath. "I understand completely, sir," Ethan replied evenly. "I hope you enjoy your meal. Please let me know if you need anything else." The man scoffed and turned back to his phone. As Ethan walked away, he heard the customer loudly complain to his dining companion about the help these days. Luke's brow was furrowed when Ethan stopped by his booth. "Dad, why was that man so mean to you?" Ethan slid into the seat across from his son, taking advantage of a momentary lull in customers. "Sometimes people forget that everyone deserves kindness, buddy. Maybe he's having a rough day, or maybe he's forgotten what it's like to work hard for something." "But you're the hardest worker I know," Luke protested, his young face serious. "And you're never mean to anybody." Ethan reached across the table and squeezed his son's hand. "That's because being kind is more important than being right or being rich. Remember what we read in church last Sunday about treating others the way we want to be treated?" Luke nodded slowly. "Even when they're not nice to us?" "Especially then," Ethan said. "Sometimes people who act cruel are hurting inside. The best thing we can do is show them there's another way to be." The diner's bell chimed as more customers entered, and Ethan stood up. "Back to work, buddy. How's that math coming along?" "I'm stuck on fractions," Luke admitted. "We'll look at it together when we get home," Ethan promised, ruffling Luke's hair before heading back to work. The rest of his shift passed in a blur of orders, coffee refills, and tired feet. By closing time, Luke had fallen asleep in the booth, his head resting on his textbook. Ethan gathered his son's school supplies, carefully putting them in the worn backpack. "Hey, sleepyhead," he whispered, gently shaking Luke's shoulder. "Time to go home." Luke blinked awake, rubbing his eyes. "Did I finish my homework?" "We'll tackle those fractions in the morning," Ethan assured him, helping his son into his jacket. Their small apartment was only a few blocks away, but the walk felt longer with exhaustion weighing down Ethan's steps. Luke leaned against him as they climbed the 3 flights of stairs to their unit. Inside, the apartment was modest but clean. Family photos lined the walls, most featuring Luke and Ethan, some including a beautiful woman with Luke's eyes, Sarah, Ethan's late wife. Her absence was a quiet ache that never fully went away. "Pajamas and teeth brushed," Ethan directed, setting Luke's backpack by the door. While Luke got ready for bed, Ethan heated up some leftover soup for himself. He hadn't had time to eat during his shift, but his appetite had faded hours ago. Luke's bedroom was small but cozy, with glow-in-the-dark stars stuck to the ceiling, a project they'd done together last summer. Ethan sat on the edge of the bed as Luke climbed under his Pokemon covers. "Dad?" Luke's voice was sleepy but concerned. "Are we going to be okay?" Ethan's heart tightened, but he kept his voice steady. "We're already okay, buddy. We've got each other, don't we?" "But I heard you talking to Mrs. Rodriguez about the rent being late again." Ethan tucked the blanket around his son's shoulders. "Things will get better, buddy, I promise." He leaned down and kissed Luke's forehead. "God has a plan for us, remember?" "I love you, Dad." "I love you too, Luke. Sweet dreams." After Luke's breathing settled into the rhythm of sleep, Ethan made his way to the kitchen table. Bills were scattered across its surface, their red past due stamps impossible to ignore in the dim light. He sat heavily in a chair, running his hands through his hair. The numbers didn't add up, no matter how many times he recalculated. Between rent, utilities, groceries, and Luke's school supplies, there was never enough to get ahead. His day job at the hardware store and evening shifts at the diner barely kept him afloat. Ethan stared at the bills, his faith warring with his worry. The weight of single parenthood pressed down on his shoulders, but he refused to let it break him. For Luke's sake, he had to keep going, had to keep believing that tomorrow would bring better things. The kitchen clock ticked steadily in the quiet apartment, marking time until another day would begin, bringing with it both challenges and possibilities. Ethan sat alone at the table, surrounded by papers that demanded more than he could give, holding on to hope with the same quiet determination that had carried him through every other difficult night. The morning sun streamed through the diner's windows, catching dust motes in its golden rays. Ethan moved between tables with practiced ease, balancing plates of steaming eggs and crispy bacon. His worn sneakers squeaked against the checkered floor as he served breakfast to the early crowd of business people and construction workers. "Order up," called Jerry from the kitchen window, sliding 2 plates of pancakes onto the counter. Ethan grabbed the plates, ignoring the burning sensation in his tired shoulders. He'd been up since 4 a.m., making Luke's lunch and getting him ready for school before his morning shift started. The diner was busier than usual, filled with the clinking of cutlery and murmured conversations. The bell above the door chimed. A woman in an impeccable black suit stepped inside, her presence immediately commanding attention. She moved with the confidence of someone used to being in charge, her heels clicking purposefully against the floor. Several heads turned to watch as she chose a table by the window, setting down an expensive leather briefcase. Ethan noticed how different she looked from their usual customers. Everything about her spelled money and power, from her perfectly styled dark hair to her designer watch that caught the light as she checked the time. "Table 6 is getting impatient," Sarah, the other server, whispered as she passed by. "That guy in the blue tie keeps snapping his fingers." "Got it," Ethan nodded, heading to the troubled table first. The man in the blue tie barely looked up from his phone. "Finally! Do you know how long I've been waiting? I could buy this entire dump with what I make in a day." "I apologize for the delay, sir," Ethan said calmly, setting down the plates. "Is there anything else you need?" From her window seat, Cassandra Price watched the exchange with sharp interest. She observed how Ethan maintained his composure, his shoulders straight despite the customer's rudeness. The man in the blue tie pulled out a $100 bill, waving it deliberately. "Here's a tip. Learn to move faster." He dropped the money on the table with a smirk. Ethan smiled politely but left the bill where it lay. "Thank you, sir, but I can't accept that. I'm just doing my job." Cassandra's eyebrows lifted slightly. She'd seen plenty of people grovel for less. After dealing with the difficult customer, Ethan approached her table, pen and pad ready. "Good morning, ma'am. Welcome to Jerry's. Black coffee, 2 eggs over medium, wheat toast." Her voice was crisp and businesslike. "And a moment of your time when convenient?" Ethan blinked, caught off guard. "I'll put your order in right away, ma'am." As he worked, he could feel her eyes following him. She noted how he helped an elderly woman with her heavy purse, how he remembered every customer's name, how he managed to keep smiling despite the morning rush. When the diner finally quieted down, Cassandra gestured for him to approach. She'd barely touched her food, but her coffee cup was empty. "Please sit." It wasn't a request. Ethan glanced around uncertainly before taking the seat across from her. "How can I help you, ma'am?" She pulled out a business card, sliding it across the table. The embossed letters caught the light. "Cassandra Price, CEO, Price Enterprises. I'd like you to come to my office this afternoon." She named an address in the expensive part of downtown. "Let's say 3 o'clock. "I'm sorry, but I have another job after this shift," Ethan explained. "I clean offices in the evenings." "Cancel it." She pulled out a pen, writing something on the back of the card. "This is my private number. I'll make it worth your time." Ethan studied the card, confusion evident on his face. "May I ask what this is about?" "You intrigue me, Mr. Miller." "Ethan Miller, Mr. Miller. I watched you refuse a $100 tip back there. Most people in your position would jump at that kind of money." "Most people in my position have their dignity, ma'am." The words came out firmer than he intended. A slight smile touched her lips. 3 o'clock, Mr. Miller. Don't be late." She stood, leaving a $50 bill under her coffee cup, despite having seen his reaction to the previous tip. That evening, after picking up Luke from his after-school program, Ethan sat at their small kitchen table, the business card still in his hand. Luke munched on his sandwich, swinging his legs under the chair. "So she just gave you her card?" Luke asked, eyes wide with curiosity. Like in the movies? Ethan nodded, still puzzled by the whole encounter. She wants me to come to her office tomorrow. Maybe she wants to give you $1 million. Luke giggled, almost choking on his milk. Right, Ethan laughed, reaching over to ruffle his son's hair. And maybe she's got a unicorn in her office too. You never know, Dad, Luke said with all the wisdom of a 9-year-old. Remember what Pastor Dave says about God working in mysterious ways? Ethan looked at his son's hopeful face and felt a familiar ache in his chest. Luke always tried to see the best in everything, just like his mother had. Finish your sandwich, buddy, Ethan said, tucking the business card into his wallet. It's probably just about some catering contract or something. But as he cleaned up the kitchen later, he couldn't shake the feeling that tomorrow would bring something more complicated than a simple business meeting. Ethan stood in the gleaming lobby of Price Enterprises, feeling desperately out of place. His reflection in the polished marble floor showed his best button-down shirt, the one he saved for parent-teacher conferences, and khakis he'd carefully ironed that morning. Around him, people in expensive suits rushed past, their shoes clicking importantly against the stone. Mr. Miller? A receptionist with a sleek headset gestured to him. Miss Price will see you now. Elevator to the 48th floor. The elevator rode smoothly upward, its glass walls offering a dizzying view of the city below. Ethan's stomach lurched, partly from the height and partly from nerves. What could someone like Cassandra Price want with a diner waiter? The elevator doors opened directly into a vast office space. Floor-to-ceiling windows stretched across an entire wall, framing the city skyline like a living painting. The room was minimalist and modern, all clean lines and stark whites, with a massive desk dominating the center. Cassandra Price stood at the windows, her back to him. She turned slowly, her dark suit perfectly tailored, her presence filling the room despite her slender frame. Mr. Miller, she said coolly, thank you for coming. She didn't offer to shake hands, instead gesturing to a chair across from her desk. Ethan sat down carefully, conscious of his worn shoes against the pristine carpet. Thank you for inviting me, Miss Price, though I'm not sure why I'm here. She studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. I've been watching you, Mr. Miller, at the diner, the way you handle difficult customers, your work ethic, your integrity. She said the last word as if testing it. I just try to do my job well, ma'am. Indeed. She walked around her desk, perching on its edge closer to him. Tell me, Mr. Miller, what would you do with $1 million? Ethan blinked, caught off guard. I'm sorry, $1 million. Tax-free. Her voice was clinical, like discussing the weather. What would you do with it? He shifted uncomfortably. I don't understand. Is this some kind of survey? No, Mr. Miller. This is a proposition. She leaned forward slightly. I'm offering you a choice. $1 million in cash? She paused, her eyes locked on his. Or one night with me. The words hung in the air like smoke. Ethan stared at her, waiting for the punchline, for hidden cameras to appear. But Cassandra's face remained serious, expectant. This is a joke, he said finally, his voice hoarse. I assure you it isn't. I'm a direct person, Mr. Miller. I don't waste time with jokes. She stood, walking back around her desk. $1 million could change your life, your son's life. No more double shifts, no more struggling to make rent. Heat crept up Ethan's neck, not embarrassment now, but anger. You've been watching me enough to know about my son? I do my research, she replied simply. The choice is yours, money or me. Her lips curved in a slight smile. Most men would consider either option a windfall. Ethan stood up so quickly, his chair scraped against the floor. I'm not most men, Miss Price, and I'm not for sale. Everyone has a price, Mr. Miller. No. His voice was quiet but firm. Everyone doesn't. My dignity isn't for sale. My self-respect isn't for sale, and I won't teach my son that everything in this world can be bought and sold. Cassandra's composed expression flickered. This is business, Mr. Miller. A simple transaction. There's nothing simple about it. He took a step toward the door, then turned back. My son looks up to me. Every day, I try to show him what it means to be a good man, to have integrity, to respect yourself and others. His voice shook slightly. I wouldn't trade his respect for all the money in the world, Miss Price. And I feel sorry for anyone who thinks that's foolish. Her face hardened. Don't presume to pity me, Mr. Miller. But Ethan was already striding toward the elevator, his hands clenched at his sides. The door slid open immediately, and he stepped inside without looking back. Cassandra Price stood in her office, staring at the closed elevator doors. For the first time in years, she felt unsettled. Her manicured fingers drummed against her desk as she replayed his words in her mind. No one had ever turned her down before. Not her money, not her body, not her power. She walked to the windows, looking down at the tiny figures moving on the streets below. Somewhere down there, a waiter with worn shoes and iron principles was walking away from a fortune. And for the first time in her career, Cassandra Price wasn't sure she had read someone correctly. The morning sun streamed through the diner's windows as Ethan wiped down tables with more force than necessary. His mind kept replaying yesterday's bizarre encounter in that towering office building. She said, "What?" Jenny, his longtime coworker, nearly dropped the coffee pot she was holding. Her gray curls bounced as she shook her head in disbelief. $1 million. Or, Ethan's voice dropped to a whisper, his face flushing. "You know, it was like some twisted moral test." Jenny clicked her tongue against her teeth. "That Cassandra Price thinks she can buy anything, or anyone. Those rich types live in a different world, honey. I just can't believe someone would." Ethan stopped mid-sentence as the bell above the door chimed. His heart nearly stopped. Cassandra Price stood in the entrance, wearing an elegant navy business suit that probably cost more than his monthly rent. The usual breakfast crowd fell silent, forks freezing halfway to mouths. She strode purposefully to an empty booth, her heels clicking against the linoleum floor. Jenny nudged Ethan with her elbow. "Well, would you look at that? Guess who's slumming it with us common folk today?" "Jenny, please," Ethan muttered, though his hands trembled slightly as he picked up a menu. He approached Cassandra's table, maintaining his professional composure. "Good morning, Miss Price." "Mr. Miller." She looked up at him, her expression surprisingly softer than yesterday. "I was hoping to find you here." "This is where I work," he said simply, holding the menu like a shield. "I'd like to order breakfast," she said, then added more quietly, "and offer an apology." Ethan blinked in surprise. "I'm listening." "Coffee first," she said, and he poured her a cup from the fresh pot he'd just brewed. She took a sip, then continued. "Yesterday was inappropriate. I've spent my career testing people's integrity, but I crossed a line." "You think?" The words slipped out before he could stop them. To his surprise, the corner of her mouth twitched upward. "Your reaction was enlightening. It's rare to meet someone who can't be bought." Other customers were openly staring now, and Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "Miss Price, I should really take your order." "I have a different proposition," she said, pulling a folder from her briefcase. "A legitimate one. My company is launching a community outreach program, and we need a consultant who understands real people, real struggles." Ethan frowned. "I'm not sure I follow." 3 months, part-time advisory role, helping us identify meaningful ways to support working families, single parents, small businesses. She opened the folder, revealing a contract. The pay is substantial, though considerably less than $1 million. This time, her smile held a hint of self-deprecating humor. "Why me?" "Because you have something my usual consultants lack: integrity and actual experience with the communities we're trying to help." She pushed the folder toward him. "Think about it. This could make a real difference, not just for you and your son, but for many families facing similar challenges." Ethan glanced at the proposed salary figure and had to grip the edge of the table. It was more than he made in a year at both his jobs combined. "I don't know anything about corporate consulting," he admitted. "You know about real life. That's what we need." Cassandra took another sip of coffee. "Now, about that breakfast order, what do you recommend?" Throughout her meal, Ethan served other customers while stealing glances at the contract during quiet moments. Jenny kept shooting him meaningful looks, but he avoided her questions. His mind was on Luke, on their struggling budget, on the stack of unpaid medical bills from his wife's final illness. When Cassandra finished her meal, she'd ordered his recommended special and actually cleaned her plate. She left both a generous tip and her business card. "Sleep on it," she said. "Call me tomorrow with your decision." That evening, Ethan sat at his small kitchen table, the contract spread out before him. Luke sat across from him, working on his math homework, but clearly more interested in the papers his father was studying. "Is it from that lady at the diner?" Luke asked, pencil tapping against his notebook. "Yes," Ethan answered honestly. He'd always believed in being truthful with his son, even about difficult things. "She's offered me a temporary job, helping her company figure out ways to help families like ours." Luke's eyes lit up. "That's awesome, Dad. You're so good at helping people." Ethan smiled at his son's enthusiasm. "It would mean some changes. I'd have to cut back hours at the diner, and I'd be working in an office sometimes. But you wouldn't have to work at the hardware store on weekends anymore? Luke asked hopefully. Probably not. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. What do you think, buddy? Should I take it? Luke put down his pencil and looked at his father with those wise eyes that sometimes seemed too mature for a 9-year-old. Remember what you always tell me? That God gives us chances to do good things? Ethan nodded, throat tight with emotion. Well, Luke continued, maybe this is one of those chances. And Dad, he reached across the table and put his small hand over his father's. You're amazing. You'll be great at helping other families. Ethan pulled out his pen, heart full of gratitude for his son's simple wisdom. As he signed his name on the contract, Luke beamed at him. You're amazing, Dad. Looking at his son's proud face, Ethan knew that no amount of money could ever match the wealth of his child's love and trust. He just prayed he was making the right decision for both of them. The glittering chandeliers of the grand ballroom cast a golden glow over the elegantly dressed crowd. Ethan Miller tugged uncomfortably at his borrowed suit collar, feeling out of place among the sea of designer outfits and polished smiles. Beside him, 9-year-old Luke gazed wide-eyed at the spectacular scene, his small hand clutching his father's. Dad, this place is huge, Luke whispered, his blue eyes taking in the marble columns and crystal decorations. It's like a castle. Ethan squeezed his son's hand. Remember what we talked about, buddy? Best behavior tonight. I know, Dad. I'll be good. Luke's serious nod made Ethan smile despite his nerves. They hadn't expected anything this grand when Cassandra invited them to what she'd called a small company event. The charity gala was clearly anything but small. Waiters in crisp black uniforms weaved through the crowd carrying silver trays of fancy appetizers that Luke kept eyeing hopefully. Mr. Miller, Cassandra's voice cut through the ambient chatter. She appeared before them in a midnight blue evening gown, her usual sharp business attire transformed into something softer, though her posture remained commanding. I'm glad you could make it. Her eyes fell to Luke, and something in her expression shifted, a slight softening around the edges. Hi, Luke chirped before Ethan could respond. I'm Luke. Your building is amazing. Dad said you're his new boss. A hint of a smile touched Cassandra's lips. It's wonderful to meet you, Luke. Would you like a tour? Luke's face lit up. Can we, Dad? Please? Ethan hesitated, but Cassandra was already gesturing to a nearby waiter. James, would you bring young Luke here some of those chocolate-dipped strawberries I saw earlier? The next hour passed in a blur of introductions and small talk. Ethan noticed how Cassandra kept glancing at Luke, something unreadable in her expression, as she watched him charm everyone he met. His son had always had that gift, the ability to make people smile without even trying. Your son is remarkable, Cassandra murmured to Ethan as they watched Luke enthusiastically describing his latest art project to a group of amused executives. He has such a pure heart. He's the best thing that ever happened to me, Ethan replied softly, after his mother passed. He trailed off, the familiar ache in his chest returning. Cassandra's face showed a flicker of something. Recognition? Pain? But before she could respond, she was pulled away by a board member wanting to discuss donation numbers. The evening wore on, and Luke's energy began to fade. Ethan was just thinking about making their excuses when he noticed his son had wandered over to where Cassandra stood alone by one of the tall windows, having finally escaped her business obligations. Luke, Ethan called out, starting to move toward them, but he was too far away to reach them quickly through the crowded room. He saw Luke tug gently on Cassandra's dress to get her attention. She turned, bending down slightly to hear what he was saying. And then everything seemed to happen in slow motion. Luke's clear voice carried just far enough in a sudden lull in the conversation. Mommy says you're my daddy. The crystal glass in Cassandra's hand slipped, catching the light as it fell to the marble floor with a musical shatter. The sound seemed to echo through the suddenly silent ballroom. Every head turned toward them. Ethan felt rooted to the spot, his mind refusing to process what he'd just heard. Cassandra's face had gone pale, her usual composure completely shattered. She stared at Ethan across the room, her eyes wide with shock and something that looked almost like fear. Luke, oblivious to the tension he'd created, continued in his innocent way. She told me in my dream last night. She said I should tell you. The silence was broken by the distinctive click of a camera shutter. A photographer who had been documenting the event had captured the moment. Cassandra's shocked face, Luke's earnest expression, and Ethan's stunned stillness, creating a tableau that would soon be everywhere. Whispers began to ripple through the crowd like wind through tall grass. Ethan could catch fragments of conversations. Did that child just say, the CEO and a waiter? Scandal. Cassandra's face transformed from shock to carefully controlled blankness. Without a word, she turned on her heel and walked swiftly toward the exit, her heels clicking against the marble floor. The crowd parted before her like the Red Sea, leaving a clear path to the door. Just before she disappeared through the ornate double doors, she paused for a fraction of a second, her hand trembling slightly on the doorframe. Then she was gone, leaving behind a room full of stunned silence and searching looks. Luke tugged on Ethan's sleeve, his voice worried now. "Dad, did I say something wrong?" Ethan couldn't find his voice to answer. He just pulled his son close, his mind racing with questions he wasn't sure he wanted answered. The photograph would be tomorrow's headlines, but right now, all he could think about was his late wife's face and wonder what secrets she'd taken with her. The whispers grew louder, and phones began to appear in hands around the room. Ethan could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes on him and Luke, could sense the story already taking shape in people's minds. But none of that mattered as much as the confusion in his son's eyes and the earth-shattering implications of those innocent words. "Mommy says you're my daddy." The evening that had started with such simple intentions had transformed into something that would change all their lives forever. As Ethan held his son close, he could feel the familiar world he'd carefully built beginning to crumble around him, leaving him with nothing but questions and the echo of those impossible words. The morning sun filtered through the threadbare curtains of Ethan's small apartment kitchen, but the warmth couldn't chase away the chill that had settled in his chest. His hands trembled as he stared at his phone, flooded with notifications and messages. The local news website's headlines screamed in bold letters. Tech CEO Cassandra Price, linked to single dad's family, secret past revealed. Ethan's coffee grew cold as he scrolled through article after article, each one more sensational than the last. Photos from last night's gala were everywhere. Luke's innocent face, Cassandra's shocked expression, and his own confusion captured for the world to see. "Dad?" Luke's sleepy voice made him jump. "Why are you up so early?" Ethan quickly locked his phone screen. "Hey buddy, just getting ready for work." He forced a smile, but Luke's perceptive eyes caught the tension in his shoulders. "Is it because of what I said to Miss Price?" Luke asked, climbing onto a kitchen chair. "Did I do something wrong?" No, Ethan assured him quickly, reaching across to squeeze his son's hand. "You didn't do anything wrong. But Luke, what exactly did Mom tell you about Miss Price?" Before Luke could answer, Ethan's phone buzzed again, Cassandra's name flashing on the screen. After a moment's hesitation, he answered, stepping into the living room. "We need to talk." Cassandra's voice was clipped, professional. "My office? As soon as possible. I have to take Luke to school," Ethan replied, his voice tight. "I'll send a car for both of you. The school can excuse one day." "No," Ethan said firmly. "Luke goes to school. I'll come after I drop him off." An hour later, Ethan found himself back in Cassandra's towering office building. The receptionist, who'd barely acknowledged him days before, now watched him with poorly concealed curiosity. News traveled fast. Cassandra stood at her floor-to-ceiling windows when he entered, her reflection showing the same immaculate composure as always. But when she turned, Ethan caught a flicker of something else. Uncertainty, perhaps even fear. "Your wife, Sarah," Cassandra began without preamble, "worked here 10 years ago." Ethan's breath caught. Sarah had never mentioned working for Price Technologies. "What?" "She was in our legal department, fresh out of law school." Cassandra moved to her desk, pulling out a file. "She left after 6 months. I barely knew her personally." "Then why would she tell Luke you're his?" Ethan couldn't finish the sentence. Cassandra's perfectly manicured fingers drummed on her desk. "There must be some misunderstanding. Perhaps Luke misheard something, or—" "Stop!" Ethan cut her off, anger finally breaking through his shock. "First that insulting proposition, then the consulting offer, and now this? What kind of game are you playing?" "This isn't a game," Cassandra snapped, her own composure cracking. "I'm as shocked as you are. I didn't." "Did you know?" Ethan demanded. "When you made that $1 million offer, did you know who I was? Who Luke was?" "No." Cassandra's voice rose. "I didn't even recognize your last name until last night. Miller isn't exactly uncommon." Outside the office, phones were ringing constantly. Through the glass walls, Ethan could see people trying to appear busy while obviously straining to hear their conversation. "I need the truth," Ethan said, lowering his voice. "All of it. Sarah never mentioned working here. Never said anything about you. Why would she tell Luke something like that?" Cassandra sank into her chair, looking suddenly vulnerable. "I really don't know." but I'll have HR pull all her old files. There must be some explanation. A knock interrupted them. Cassandra's assistant poked her head in. Miss Price? The board is requesting an emergency meeting, and there are several reporters in the lobby. Clear my schedule, Cassandra ordered, and get security to escort them out. She turned back to Ethan. Give me time to look into this, please. But Ethan was already heading for the door. Just stay away from Luke until we figure this out. He's confused enough already. When Ethan arrived at school to pick up Luke that afternoon, he found his son sitting alone on the playground bench, other children whispering nearby. Luke's shoulders were hunched, his usually bright face clouded. Hey, sport, Ethan said gently, sitting beside him. Rough day? Tommy said his mom saw us on the news, Luke mumbled. He asked if Miss Price was my real mom. His bottom lip trembled. But that's not true, right? Mom was my mom. Ethan's heart clenched. Of course she was, buddy. Your mom loved you more than anything in this world. Then why did she say Miss Price was my daddy? Luke's voice cracked. I don't understand. Ethan pulled his son close, feeling him shake with confused tears. I don't understand either, Luke, but we'll figure it out together, okay? I promise. That night, after finally getting Luke to sleep, Ethan sat in the dim light of his bedroom. In his hands, he held a worn photo album. Sarah's smile beamed up at him from their wedding photos, her eyes bright with love and promise. He traced her face with gentle fingers. What didn't you tell me? He whispered to the photograph. What secrets did you take with you? The smiling face in the photo offered no answers, only the echo of memories that suddenly felt incomplete. Ethan's throat tightened as he realized that the truth, whatever it was, might change everything they thought they knew about their family. The sharp rap of knuckles on wood echoed through Ethan's apartment just as he finished wiping down the kitchen counter. He froze, recognizing the commanding pattern of the knock. Luke looked up from his spot on the worn couch, cartoon momentarily forgotten. Dad, someone's at the door. Ethan dried his hands on a dish towel, his jaw tightening. Through the peephole, he saw exactly who he expected. Cassandra Price, looking decidedly out of place in his modest apartment building hallway in her tailored business suit. When he opened the door, she stood there clutching 2 brown paper grocery bags, her usual confidence wavering slightly. May I come in? Ethan hesitated, then stepped aside. The contrast between Cassandra's polished appearance and his apartment's shabby furniture made him acutely aware of every worn spot and scuff mark. Hi, Miss Price. Luke called out cheerfully from the couch, seemingly immune to the tension. Hello, Luke. Cassandra's voice softened noticeably when addressing the boy. She turned to Ethan and held up the bags. I thought, well, I brought some groceries. We don't need charity, Ethan said stiffly. It's not charity, it's... Cassandra paused, obviously struggling to find the right words. Consider it an apology for the media circus. Luke bounced over, peering into one of the bags. Dad, look, they have those fancy cookies you never let me get. Despite himself, Ethan felt his resolve cracking at his son's excitement. Fine, you can put them on the counter. Cassandra moved toward their small kitchen, her designer heels clicking against the linoleum. She began unpacking the bags with methodical precision. Fresh vegetables, quality meat, those expensive cookies Luke had spotted, and more. I was about to make dinner, Ethan said, still standing awkwardly by the door. Luke needs to eat before bedtime. Oh, Cassandra's hand stilled over a package of pasta. I could stay to talk? The request hung in the air between them. Luke looked between the adults, his homework forgotten on the coffee table. Please, Dad? Luke asked. Miss Price could help me with my math while you cook. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, recognizing defeat. All right, but this doesn't fix everything. As he started preparing a simple pasta dish with the ingredients Cassandra brought, he watched from the corner of his eye as she settled next to Luke on the couch. She kicked off her heels and tucked her feet under her, looking surprisingly human as she leaned over Luke's math worksheet. So, if you have 12 apples and need to share them equally between 4 friends, Cassandra's patient voice carried across the small space. That's 3 each, Luke declared proudly. Excellent. Now, what if we had 15 apples? The domestic scene before him made Ethan's chest tight. He focused on chopping vegetables, trying to ignore how natural it felt having Cassandra there, how easily Luke had accepted her presence. When dinner was ready, they gathered around the small kitchen table. Luke chatted happily about school, seemingly oblivious to the underlying tension between the adults. This is really good, Dad, Luke said between bites. Miss Price, did you know my dad used to work in a real restaurant kitchen? I didn't. Cassandra looked genuinely interested, her earlier corporate mask completely gone. "What happened?" "The restaurant closed," Ethan said quietly. "Right after Sarah, after my wife passed. It was a rough time." Cassandra's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "I'm sorry. That must have been incredibly difficult." "We managed." Ethan's tone was clipped, but then he saw Luke's worried expression. He softened his voice. "We always manage, don't we, buddy? Because we have each other." Luke nodded sagely, then turned to Cassandra. "And now we have you too, right?" The question hung heavy in the air. Cassandra's composed facade cracked slightly, revealing something vulnerable underneath. "Luke," Ethan started, but Cassandra interrupted. "I'd like to help if your father will let me," she said carefully. "Not with money or groceries, but just being here sometimes." Ethan studied her face, searching for any sign of manipulation or ulterior motive. Instead, he found only sincerity and something that looked surprisingly like loneliness. After dinner, Luke insisted on showing Cassandra his collection of drawings tacked to the bedroom wall. She examined each one with genuine interest, asking questions and praising his artistic choices. The sight of the powerful CEO sitting cross-legged on Luke's rocket ship bedspread, discussing crayon techniques, was almost surreal. "It's getting late, buddy," Ethan finally said from the doorway. "Time for your story in bed." "Can Miss Price stay for the story?" Luke asked, already climbing under his covers. "I should go," Cassandra said, standing up and smoothing her wrinkled skirt. "Thank you for dinner, Ethan. And Luke, thank you for sharing your artwork with me." She gathered her things quietly, slipping her heels back on by the door. Ethan followed her out to the hallway, leaving Luke's bedroom door cracked open. "This doesn't make everything okay," he said quietly. "The media attention, the confusion for Luke, it's a lot to process." "I know." Cassandra's professional mask slipped back into place, but not completely. "I'll have my PR team handle the press. No one will bother you or Luke." She turned to leave, but paused at the building's window, which offered a clear view into Luke's bedroom. Inside, Ethan had settled into the familiar routine, sitting on the edge of Luke's bed with a worn copy of The Little Prince. His voice carried faintly through the glass as he read. Luke's eyes already heavy with sleep, Cassandra stood transfixed, watching the tender scene. Something stirred in her chest, an ache she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. The sight of their simple, loving ritual made her magnificent penthouse feel suddenly cold and empty in comparison. She touched the glass lightly, her manicured fingers leaving the faintest impression on the window pane, then turned and walked away into the gathering darkness. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Price Enterprises' executive boardroom, casting long shadows across the polished mahogany table. Cassandra sat at the head, her posture perfect as always, but her fingers traced invisible patterns on the leather armrest, a rare sign of discomfort. "This is unprecedented, Miss Price." Bernard Matthews, the eldest board member, adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses with trembling fingers. "A CEO of your caliber associating with a diner worker?" Around the table, other board members shifted in their expensive chairs. Some couldn't even meet her eyes. Martha Winters, usually her strongest ally, cleared her throat. "The media coverage is concerning. Rags to riches romance might sell magazines, but our shareholders are nervous." Cassandra's jaw tightened. "Mr. Miller is a consultant for our community outreach program. His insights have been valuable." "A consultant?" Roger Thompson scoffed, tossing a tabloid onto the table. The glossy cover showed a grainy photo of Cassandra, Ethan, and Luke at the charity gala. "This looks far more personal than professional." "My personal life is not up for discussion." Cassandra's voice carried that familiar steel edge that had cowed countless opponents in merger negotiations. Bernard leaned forward, his voice gentler but no less concerned. "Your personal choices reflect on this company, Cassandra. You've built an empire on being untouchable, uncompromising. Now people are wondering if you've gone soft." The word soft hit harder than Cassandra expected. She thought of Luke's innocent smile, of Ethan's quiet dignity. When had those things started mattering to her? "Perhaps," Martha suggested carefully, "it would be best to distance yourself from this situation. We can terminate his consulting contract with a generous severance package." Cassandra stood abruptly, making several board members flinch. "Mr. Miller's contract stands. His integrity and work ethic are exactly what this company needs more of." Meeting adjourned. As her board members filed out, their whispers trailing behind them like perfume, doubt crept into Cassandra's mind. Had she let emotions cloud her judgment? Was she risking everything she'd built? Across town at Joe's Diner, Ethan was living his own version of scrutiny. The lunch rush brought the usual chaos of clattering plates and sizzling grills, but today carried an undercurrent of whispers and sidelong glances. "Order up for table 6, Joe called from the kitchen. Ethan grabbed the plates, ignoring the 2 women at table 4, who quickly buried their faces in their menus as he passed. Their poorly concealed whispers followed him anyway. "That's him, the one dating Cassandra Price. Gold digger, obviously. Did you hear about the $1 million? Ethan's hands trembled slightly as he set down the plates at table 6, but his voice remained steady. "Can I get you folks anything else?" A businessman in an expensive suit looked up from his phone, smirking. "Hey, if you're dating Cassandra Price, why are you still waiting tables? Trouble in paradise?" The other diners fell silent, watching. Ethan felt heat rise in his neck, but he remembered Luke's admiring eyes. What example would he set by losing his temper? "Your coffee's getting cold, sir," Ethan said quietly. "Let me warm that up for you." He moved through the rest of his shift with mechanical precision, each whisper and snicker bouncing off his determined focus. When a teenage girl asked for a selfie to show her friends she'd met Cassandra Price's boyfriend, he politely declined and recommended the apple pie instead. Unknown to Ethan, Cassandra watched this scene unfold from her parked car across the street. She'd told her driver to take a detour after the board meeting, needing to clear her head. Instead, she found herself studying Ethan through the diner's large windows. She observed how he handled each snide comment with grace, how he continued to smile genuinely at children and elderly customers who treated him normally. When a customer deliberately spilled their coffee and blamed him, Ethan simply cleaned it up without complaint, though Cassandra could see the tension in his shoulders. In her world of corporate takeovers and power plays, she'd forgotten what real strength looked like. Here was a man who could have taken her $1 million, who could have used their connection for fame or advantage, but instead chose to maintain his dignity through honest work, despite the humiliation. A knock on her car window startled her. Joe, the diner's owner, stood there with 2 takeout cups of coffee. Cassandra lowered the window. "Thought you might want some coffee while you're keeping watch," Joe said, handing her the cups. "He's a good man, Miss Price. Too good for all this gossip nonsense." Cassandra accepted the coffee, unable to deny her presence or her interest. Inside the diner, Ethan was showing a young waitress how to properly balance a heavy tray, his patient instruction a stark contrast to the whispers still circulating around him. "Yes," Cassandra said softly, more to herself than to Joe. "He is." The gravel crunched beneath Ethan's old sedan as he drove through the ornate iron gates of Cassandra's countryside estate. Luke pressed his face against the window, eyes wide at the sprawling green lawns and magnificent maple trees that lined the winding driveway. "Dad, look at that fountain." Luke pointed excitedly at the marble centerpiece where water danced in the morning light. "It's like something from a fairy tale." Ethan gripped the steering wheel tighter, his knuckles turning white. "Remember what we talked about, buddy? This is just a normal picnic. We're not here to ask for anything," Luke finished, nodding solemnly. "I know, Dad. But can we still have fun?" Ethan's expression softened. "Of course we can." Cassandra waited for them on the front steps of her Victorian mansion, dressed more casually than they'd ever seen her. In jeans and a light blue sweater, she held a wicker picnic basket in one hand, looking almost uncertain. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said as they approached, her usual commanding tone replaced by something gentler. "Luke really wanted to," Ethan replied honestly, keeping his distance. "I packed everything myself," Cassandra added quickly, lifting the basket. "No chef, no catering, just normal picnic food." Luke bounced on his toes. "Did you make peanut butter and jelly?" A genuine smile crossed Cassandra's face. "Actually, yes. Though I may have watched a YouTube tutorial first." They walked together down a well-maintained path that led to a peaceful lake. The morning air was crisp, carrying the sweet scent of wildflowers. Luke ran ahead, chasing a butterfly, while Ethan and Cassandra followed at a measured pace. "I have fishing rods," Cassandra offered, gesturing to equipment already set up on the dock. "And kites. I remember you mentioned Luke likes them." Ethan glanced at her sideways. "You didn't have to go to all this trouble." "I wanted to." She paused, watching Luke examine a cluster of daisies. "No hidden agendas, Ethan. Just a day away from everything." They spread the checkered blanket under a massive oak tree. Luke marveled at Cassandra's slightly misshapen sandwiches, declaring them perfectly imperfect. His infectious laughter seemed to melt away the tension, bit by bit. After lunch, Cassandra taught Luke how to bait a hook, her usually pristine hands getting dirty without complaint. When Luke caught his first fish, a small sunfish, her cheer was as loud as Ethan's. "Did you see that, Dad?" Luke beamed, carefully releasing the fish back into the lake. "Miss Price showed me the secret." "The secret is patience," Cassandra said, ruffling Luke's hair without thinking. She quickly pulled her hand back, but Luke just smiled wider. As the afternoon stretched on, they flew kites in the open field. Luke's red dragon kite soared highest, while Cassandra struggled with her blue butterfly, tangling the strings repeatedly. "Here," Ethan found himself saying, stepping closer. "You're fighting the wind too much. Work with it instead." His hands briefly covered hers, showing her the right motion. For a moment, neither of them breathed. Then Luke shouted, "Look, they're dancing together." Their kites had indeed begun a graceful aerial dance, and the spell broke as they both laughed. During a quiet moment, while Luke collected interesting rocks by the water's edge, Cassandra spoke softly. "You know, I own all of this, but I've never actually spent a day just enjoying it." Ethan looked at her. "Never?" She shook her head. "It was always about impressing someone, hosting the right people, making connections. I forgot what it's like to just be." "Luke has that effect on people," Ethan said. "He reminds us what matters." "You're lucky to have each other," Cassandra whispered. And for the first time, Ethan heard real emotion in her voice. "The way he looks at you, Ethan, that's worth more than anything in my vault." The sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Luke's energy finally started to fade, his steps growing slower. "We should head back," Ethan said, gathering their things. "Stay," Cassandra blurted out. I have guest rooms. It's a long drive back to the city, and Luke looks tired." Ethan hesitated, but Luke was already yawning. "Please, Dad, my legs are too sleepy to go home." The guest room was warm and cozy, with twin beds dressed in soft flannel sheets. Luke changed into borrowed pajamas that Cassandra found in a closet. "From when my niece visited," she explained. To everyone's surprise, Luke asked Cassandra to help tuck him in. She moved awkwardly at first, but then with increasing tenderness, smoothing the blanket over his shoulders. "Thank you for the best day," Luke murmured sleepily. "You're not as scary as everyone says." Cassandra's breath caught. She stood very still as Ethan leaned down to kiss Luke's forehead, whispering, "Sweet dreams, buddy." In the soft lamplight, watching father and son, Cassandra felt something shift deep inside her chest, a crack in the armor she'd spent decades building. Her throat tightened as she recognized the unfamiliar feeling warming her heart, belonging. She quietly backed away from the tender scene, but not before Luke's drowsy voice called out, "Good night, Miss Price. Don't forget to catch more happiness tomorrow." Ethan sat at his kitchen table late one night, calculator in hand, trying to make the numbers work. Luke's 10th birthday was just a week away, and the bills kept piling up. He rubbed his tired eyes, looking at the circled items in the toy store catalog. A new bike, art supplies, and that space-themed backpack Luke had been eyeing for months. The morning shift at the diner had been particularly rough. A customer had complained about cold eggs, refusing to pay, and his tips were lower than usual. Ethan's shoulders slumped as he realized he might not be able to give Luke the birthday he deserved. "Still up?" Luke's sleepy voice came from the hallway. "Hey buddy, what are you doing out of bed?" Ethan quickly shuffled the bills under the catalog. "I heard you thinking," Luke said, climbing onto his father's lap like he used to when he was smaller. "You always tap your fingers when you're worried." Ethan hugged his son close, breathing in the scent of his freshly washed hair. "Just doing some grown-up stuff. Nothing for you to worry about." The next morning, while Ethan was clearing tables, Cassandra walked into the diner. She'd been coming more frequently lately, usually sitting in his section with her laptop. Today, she seemed different, more approachable in a casual sweater instead of her usual power suits. "I heard it's Luke's birthday next week," she said, stirring her coffee. Ethan tensed. "How did you know that?" "He mentioned it during the picnic." Cassandra hesitated, then continued. "I'd like to help organize a party. The community hall at your church would be perfect." "I can't accept," Ethan started. "This isn't charity," Cassandra interrupted firmly. It's me learning how to be part of something real." Her voice softened. "Please, let me do this for Luke." After much convincing, Ethan agreed, but with conditions, nothing extravagant, no expensive gifts. Cassandra nodded, but there was a glint in her eye that made him wonder what she was planning. The day of the party arrived, and Ethan's jaw dropped when they walked into the community hall. Simple decorations transformed the space. Strings of twinkling lights, blue and silver balloons, and hand-painted space-themed banners made by the church's youth group. It was tasteful and perfect, nothing flashy or overwhelming. Luke bounced with excitement. "Dad, look! There's Miss Roberts from Sunday school, and Pastor Jim, and all my friends." The hall filled with familiar faces, diner regulars, church members, Luke's classmates and their parents. Mrs. Thompson from the bakery brought her famous chocolate cake, decorated with stars and planets. Mr. Rodriguez, who fixed their car for free last winter, led the kids in space-themed games. Cassandra stood near the punch bowl, looking uncertain until Luke ran over and grabbed her hand. "Come on, you have to join the asteroid tag game." To everyone's surprise, including her own, Cassandra kicked off her shoes and joined in. Her laughter mixed with the children's as they darted between chairs and tables, trying to avoid being tagged by the asteroid. Ethan watched, something warm spreading in his chest as Cassandra helped a little girl who had stumbled, then joined in singing "Happy Birthday" with genuine enthusiasm. She looked different here. Her usual sharp edges, softened by the church hall's warm light and the simple joy of celebration. The party moved smoothly from games to cake to presents. The community had come together. One family gave Luke art supplies, another the space backpack he'd wanted. When Luke opened Cassandra's gift, it wasn't the expensive tech gadget Ethan had feared. Instead, it was a handmade coupon book for space adventures. Promises of trips to the planetarium, stargazing nights, and rocket-building workshops they could do together. Luke's eyes shone. "Really? We can do all these things? Really?" Cassandra smiled, and for once, there wasn't a trace of her CEO persona in sight. "Your dad can come too, of course." As the party wound down, Ethan found Cassandra helping Mrs. Thompson pack up leftover cake for families to take home. The sight of the powerful CEO carefully wrapping paper plates in foil struck him as both amusing and touching. "Thank you," he said quietly. "This was perfect." Cassandra looked up, a streak of frosting somehow on her cheek. "I never knew it could be like this," she admitted. "Everyone here. They don't care about my title or my bank account. They just accepted me." "That's what community is," Ethan said. "What family is." Their eyes met, and something shifted in the space between them. The fluorescent lights of the church hall softened, and for a moment, they weren't the CEO and the diner waiter. They were just two people standing in a room full of love and acceptance, understanding something new about each other. Luke's voice broke the moment. "Dad, Miss Price, Pastor Jim is teaching us how to make paper airplanes." They turned toward Luke's excited calls, but that moment of connection lingered, as warm and real as the birthday candles' glow that had lit up Luke's smiling face. The church community hall's lights dimmed as the last guests said their goodbyes. Colorful streamers and deflating balloons swayed in the evening breeze through the open windows. Luke had fallen asleep on his father's shoulder, worn out from the excitement of what he declared was the best birthday ever. "I can have my driver take him home," Cassandra offered softly, watching Luke's peaceful face. "Would you like to walk? It's a beautiful night." Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "That would be nice, thank you." He carefully transferred Luke to the waiting car, tucking his son's favorite blanket around him. The driver promised to wait outside their apartment building. The autumn night wrapped around them like a gentle embrace as they began their walk. Street lamps cast warm pools of light on the sidewalk, and a carpet of stars sparkled overhead. Their footsteps fell into an easy rhythm, neither feeling pressured to break the comfortable silence. "You have an amazing community here," Cassandra finally said, her voice carrying a hint of wistfulness. "I've never seen anything quite like it." Ethan smiled, his hands in his pockets. "They're good people, salt of the earth, as my dad used to say. They've helped us through some rough times." They passed the local park where earlier that day, children had played and parents had chatted during the party. Now it was peaceful, with only cricket songs and rustling leaves. "You know," Cassandra began, slowing her pace, "I've been thinking about something." She stopped near a bench, turning to face him. The moonlight softened her usually sharp features. "When I first met you, I thought I had you figured out. Another struggling worker, someone I could test. I was so wrong, Ethan." He met her gaze, seeing vulnerability there that she rarely showed. "We all make mistakes in judgment. No, let me finish." She took a deep breath. "I admire you, not for what you do or what you have, but for who you are. Your integrity, your kindness, the way you raise Luke." Her voice grew softer. "The way you see the good in people, even when they don't deserve it." The night seemed to hold its breath. Ethan felt his heart quicken as Cassandra stepped closer. Her perfume, subtle and elegant, mingled with the scent of autumn leaves. "I've never met anyone like you," she whispered. Their faces drew closer, the moment heavy with possibility. Ethan could feel the warmth of her breath, see the question in her eyes. For a brief second, he allowed himself to imagine what it would be like to close that distance. But then Luke's face flashed in his mind. His son's trust, his innocence, the memory of whispered rumors at the diner, the scrutiny of Cassandra's board members, the worlds of difference between them. Ethan stepped back, gentle but firm. "Cassandra, He struggled to find the right words. "We're from different worlds. It would complicate things. For Luke, for your company." He saw the hurt flash across her face before she could hide it behind her usual composed mask. She straightened, smoothing her designer jacket with practiced grace. "Of course," she said, her voice steady but cooler now. "You're right. I apologize if I made you uncomfortable." "You didn't," Ethan said quickly. "It's just no explanation needed." She gave him a small smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "We should get back. It's late, and you have an early shift tomorrow." They walked the remaining blocks in silence, the easy comfort from earlier replaced by an awkward tension when they reached Ethan's apartment building. Cassandra's car was waiting as promised, Luke still sleeping peacefully inside. "Thank you again for everything you did for Luke's birthday," Ethan said sincerely. It meant the world to him. Cassandra nodded, already turning toward her own car parked behind. "It was my pleasure. Good night, Ethan." He watched as she slipped into her sleek vehicle, the engine purring to life. The taillights grew smaller and smaller until they disappeared around a corner, leaving him standing alone on the sidewalk. The stars continued their silent vigil overhead as Ethan's heart pulled him in different directions, the safe, known path he'd chosen and the uncertain road he'd just turned away from. His hand rested on the cold metal of the apartment building's door handle, but he couldn't quite bring himself to go inside yet. The night air felt heavy with possibilities now lost, and his chest ached with a feeling he wasn't ready to name. The morning sun streamed through the diner's windows, but its warmth couldn't reach Ethan's heart. He moved mechanically between tables, trying to ignore the whispers and sideways glances from customers who clutched their phones, reading the latest tabloid headlines. "Did you see?" A woman in a business suit nudged her companion. "That waiter's the one trying to con Cassandra Price." "Gold digger," her friend replied, loud enough for Ethan to hear. Ethan's hands trembled as he poured coffee, some of it splashing onto the saucer. The headlines had been everywhere for days. "Poor waiter seduces billionaire CEO, Price's new boy toy." "The $1 Million Man." Sources reveal single dad's plot to exploit Price fortune. His phone buzzed again, another message from Luke's teacher. The kids at school had seen the stories too. Luke had come home crying yesterday, asking why everyone said his dad was a bad person. The bell above the diner door chimed, and Ethan's stomach dropped as Cassandra walked in, her designer heels clicking against the linoleum floor. She wore her usual power suit, but her face showed concern. "Ethan, we need to talk," she said quietly, approaching the counter. "I'm working," he replied coldly, turning away. "Please, this is important." The diner manager, seeing Cassandra, quickly told Ethan to take his break. With rigid shoulders, Ethan followed her to a corner booth, away from prying ears. "I know about the stories," Cassandra started. "My PR team is handling it." "Handling it?" Ethan's voice cracked with emotion. "My son came home crying yesterday. He's being bullied because of these lies. Everyone thinks I'm some kind of con artist." "I understand you're upset." "No, you don't understand." Ethan's fist hit the table, making the salt shaker rattle. "This isn't just some PR problem for you to solve. This is my life, Luke's life." Cassandra's composed facade cracked slightly. "I'm trying to fix this." "Fix it? Like you fixed everything else? With money and power?" Ethan leaned forward, his voice low but intense. "Was this your plan all along? First that insulting proposition, then the job offer? Was it all just some game to you?" "Of course not," Cassandra's eyes flashed. "How dare you suggest? Then why aren't these stories being denied? Why isn't your company making a statement?" Ethan's voice rose. Unless you want people to think I'm after your money. It makes you look better, doesn't it?" Poor Cassandra Price, almost taken advantage of by the scheming single dad. Other customers were staring now, phones recording discreetly. Cassandra noticed and tried to calm the situation. "Ethan, please, let's discuss this somewhere private." "Why? Afraid of more bad publicity?" The bitterness in his voice was painful. "You know what? I was wrong to ever trust you. To think you'd changed." Just then, they heard a small gasp. Both turned to see Luke standing there, his backpack clutched to his chest. He must have come straight from school to the diner, as he sometimes did. "Luke?" Ethan's anger melted into concern. "Buddy, you shouldn't be here right now." But Luke's eyes were filled with tears, darting between his father and Cassandra. "Why are you fighting? Is it because of me?" "No, sweetie." Cassandra reached for him, but Luke stepped back. "Everyone at school says Dad only pretends to like you because of money." Luke's voice quivered. "They say I'm just a mistake. That's why you didn't want me before, right?" The color drained from Cassandra's face. "Luke, am I just a mistake to you both?" Luke's words came out in a sob. Ethan moved quickly to his son's side, pulling him close. "You were never a mistake, Luke. Never." But Luke pushed away from him too, tears streaming down his face. "Then why is everyone saying such mean things? Why can't we just be happy?" The diner had gone silent, all eyes on their drama. Ethan felt the weight of judgment, the whispers, the phones pointed their way. This was exactly what he'd feared, his son being hurt by all this mess. "We're leaving," Ethan said firmly, taking Luke's hand. He turned to Cassandra, his voice cold. "I quit. Whatever this was, it's over." "Ethan, please." Cassandra stood, her carefully maintained composure cracking. "Let me explain." "There's nothing to explain." Ethan guided Luke toward the door. "You live in your world, and we'll live in ours. That's how it should have stayed." "Don't go." Cassandra's voice held a note of desperation he'd never heard before. "Please, I care about you both." Ethan paused at the door, Luke's small hand trembling in his. "If you really cared, you would have protected us from this." The door slammed behind them with a finality that echoed through the diner. Cassandra stood frozen, aware of the dozens of phones probably recording her moment of humiliation, but she didn't care about that anymore. She sank back into the booth, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. The mighty CEO, who had built an empire through cold calculation and control, felt her carefully constructed walls crumbling. "I ruined everything," she whispered, a tear sliding down her cheek. In the aftermath of their departure, the diner slowly returned to its usual buzz of activity, but Cassandra remained there, staring at the empty seat where Ethan had Saturday. The memory of Luke's heartbroken face haunted her. For all her wealth and power, she had failed to protect the two people who had somehow become most precious to her. Ethan sat on the edge of Luke's bed, his son's small frame shaking with sobs. The bedroom's dinosaur nightlight cast gentle shadows on the wall, but couldn't chase away the darkness in their hearts. Luke clutched his stuffed bear, a gift from his late mother, pressing it tight against his chest. "Am I really just a mistake?" Luke whispered between hiccups. Ethan's heart cracked at those words. He pulled Luke closer, wrapping him in a protective embrace. "Listen to me, buddy. You are the greatest blessing in my life. You're not a mistake. You never were, and you never will be." Luke wiped his nose with his sleeve. "But those kids at school, they said mean things about you and Miss Price. They said you were just after her money. People say unkind things when they don't understand," Ethan explained, keeping his voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside. "But what matters is what we know in our hearts to be true." "What is true, Dad?" Ethan took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "What's true is that I love you more than anything in this world. What's true is that your mother loved you with all her heart, and what's true is that you make this world a better place just by being in it." After tucking Luke in and making sure he had fallen asleep, Ethan retreated to the living room. The small apartment felt emptier than usual. Bills still lay scattered on the coffee table, but they seemed trivial compared to the weight pressing on his chest. He sank into his worn armchair, the one he used to rock Luke to sleep in when he was a baby. The betrayal cut deep, not just the tabloids and rumors, but the thought that Cassandra might have orchestrated it all, or at least allowed it to happen. He had started to trust her, to see beyond her wealthy facade to the person underneath. Now he wondered if it had all been an illusion. Ethan's eyes fell on the small wooden cross hanging on the wall, a wedding gift from his late wife's parents. He clasped his hands together, bowing his head. "Lord," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion, "I need your guidance. I'm lost and hurting, and I don't know how to protect my son from all this. Please show me the way." Across town, in her penthouse apartment, Cassandra Price stood at her floor-to-ceiling windows. The city sparkled below, a sea of lights that usually made her feel powerful and in control. Tonight, it only emphasized her loneliness. She walked to her home office, pulling out an old photo album she hadn't opened in years. The first picture showed a little girl in an expensive dress, standing alone at a birthday party where no other children had come. Her parents had been too busy with their social obligations to notice her tears. Page after page told the same story: material wealth and emotional poverty. Christmas mornings with presents but no family gathered around. School achievements with no one to proudly display them to. She had built her empire on that foundation of loneliness, turning her pain into drive, her emptiness into ambition. Now, seeing Luke's tears earlier that day had shattered something inside her. In his innocent face, she saw herself, a child caught in the crossfire of adult complications. In Ethan's disappointed eyes, she recognized the same judgment she'd always feared, that she wasn't worthy of real connection. Cassandra moved to her private chapel, a room she had included in her penthouse design but rarely used. The space was pristine, untouched, like her own faith. She knelt awkwardly on the cushioned bench, unsure how to begin. "I don't know if I remember how to do this properly," she whispered to the silence. "I've spent so long believing I could control everything, but I can't control hearts. I can't force love or trust. Please, help me understand what to do." Her phone buzzed incessantly with messages from board members and PR teams, all demanding her attention, all wanting to know how she would handle the scandal. She ignored them all. Instead, she moved to her desk and opened her laptop. The resignation letter started to take shape under her fingers. To the board of directors, "After careful consideration, I hereby tender my resignation as Chief Executive Officer." But her fingers stilled on the keyboard. Was this really the answer? Running away, just like her parents had done whenever things got emotionally complicated? No, redemption wouldn't come from grand gestures or dramatic exits. Cassandra looked at Luke's birthday party photo on her desk, the one moment when she had felt truly part of something real. The joy in his eyes, the warmth of the church community, Ethan's genuine smile. She couldn't buy that kind of happiness, and she couldn't earn it by martyring herself either. She closed the laptop slowly, a different kind of resolution forming in her mind. For the first time in her life, she needed to learn how to fight for something other than power or profit. She needed to fight for forgiveness, for understanding, for the chance to make things right. But as she sat there in the growing darkness, she realized she had no idea how to begin. All her business acumen, all her wealth and influence, meant nothing in the face of a broken trust and a wounded heart. She would have to find a different way, a better way, to prove herself worthy of the family she had begun to love. The night stretched long before both of them. Ethan, in his modest apartment, finding comfort in his faith and his son's peaceful breathing, and Cassandra in her luxurious penthouse, learning that true wealth couldn't be measured in dollars and cents. Their prayers, though separated by miles and circumstances, shared the same core of hope and hurt, each seeking guidance for the uncertain path ahead. The marble lobby of Price Enterprises buzzed with anticipation. Camera crews jostled for position, their equipment casting harsh lights across the polished floors. Security guards in dark suits maintained a careful perimeter around the podium, bearing the company's silver logo. Board members filed in, their whispers echoing off the walls. Something was different about this press conference. No one had been briefed beforehand. Even Janet Wheeler, the head of PR, stood off to the side with an unusually worried expression, checking her tablet repeatedly. At precisely 9 a.m., Cassandra Price emerged from the elevator. The usual clicks of camera shutters filled the air, but the photographers lowered their cameras in surprise. Gone was her trademark power suit. Instead, she wore a simple navy blue dress, her hair pulled back in a soft knot. Her heels clicked steadily across the floor as she approached the podium. The board members exchanged concerned glances. Thomas Bradford, the senior director, leaned forward in his chair, his knuckles white against the armrest. Cassandra adjusted the microphone, her movements deliberate. The crowd fell silent. "Good morning," she began, her voice clear but gentler than usual. "I've called this press conference to make an announcement that may surprise many of you." She paused, taking a deep breath. A camera flashed. "Effective immediately, I am stepping down as CEO of Price Enterprises." The lobby erupted in gasps and exclamations. Reporters shot to their feet, hands raised. Bradford half rose from his chair, his face red. Cassandra raised her hand for silence. "For 20 years, I've measured success in dollars and cents. I've built walls of wealth around myself, thinking they would protect me from the emptiness I felt inside." Her voice wavered slightly, but she pressed on. "I was wrong." The reporters scribbled frantically in their notebooks. Some of the board members were now on their phones, likely calling their brokers. "I am announcing the creation of the Sarah Miller Foundation, named in honor of a remarkable woman who understood what truly matters in life, family, faith, and love. Cassandra's eyes grew bright with unshed tears. This foundation will support single parents struggling to provide for their children. I am transferring 80% of my personal wealth, approximately $400 million, to establish this endowment. The lobby exploded into chaos. Reporters shouted questions. Photographers surged forward, and Bradford was now standing, gesturing wildly to security. But Cassandra remained steady at the podium, a small smile playing at her lips. "Miss Price, what prompted this decision?" A reporter called out above the din. Cassandra's smile deepened. "I met a man who turned down $1 million because his integrity meant more. I met a little boy who showed me that love isn't earned through wealth or power. They taught me that true worth isn't measured by what you have, but by what you give." More questions flew at her. "Is this about the recent scandal? Are you having a breakdown? What about the shareholders?" She raised her voice slightly, but maintained her composure. "To our shareholders, the company remains strong, and the board will appoint new leadership. To our employees, your jobs are secure. This is about my personal fortune, not company assets." Janet Wheeler had recovered enough to step forward, trying to wrap up the conference, but Cassandra wasn't finished. "One last thing," she said, her voice now strong and clear. "To those who spread cruel rumors about Ethan Miller, you failed. You tried to paint him as someone seeking fortune, when in fact he's the one who taught me that character matters more than cash. He showed me what real wealth looks like. It looks like a father reading to his son after working 2 jobs. It looks like a man who treats others with dignity even when they mock him. It looks like faith that carries you through dark times." The lobby had grown quiet now, the reporters captivated. Even Bradford had sunk back into his chair, defeated. "That's all. Thank you." Cassandra stepped back from the podium, ignoring the fresh wave of questions. She walked toward the exit, her head high, shoulders straight, but unlike every other time she'd walked through that lobby, she wasn't wearing her usual armor of cold authority. Instead, she moved like someone who had just set down a heavy burden. In his small apartment across town, Ethan sat frozen on his worn couch, watching the broadcast on his old TV. Luke pressed against his side, both of them staring at the screen in disbelief. "She did it for us, Dad," Luke whispered, his eyes wide. Ethan couldn't speak. On the screen, they replayed clips of Cassandra's announcement, her voice steady as she talked about integrity and love. The news anchor was already speculating about the mysterious single father who had apparently inspired one of the country's most powerful CEOs to give away her fortune. Luke tugged at his father's sleeve. "Is that why you didn't take the money that time? Because of integrity?" Ethan finally found his voice. "That's right, buddy." He pulled his son closer. "Some things are worth more than money." On the TV, Cassandra's image froze in a moment of genuine smile. Not the practice one she used for business photos, but something real and vulnerable. The ticker at the bottom of the screen scrolled with updates about Price Enterprises' stock price and speculation about the future of the company. But Ethan barely noticed. He was seeing Cassandra, really seeing her, perhaps for the first time. The evening shadows stretched long across Ethan's small apartment complex as Cassandra's car pulled into the parking lot. She sat there for a moment, her hands gripping the steering wheel, her usual confident demeanor replaced by visible nervousness. The dashboard clock blinked 8:45 p.m. Taking a deep breath, she stepped out into the cool night air. Her designer heels clicked softly against the concrete as she made her way to Ethan's door. She had traded her usual power suit for a simple sweater and jeans, a deliberate choice that felt both foreign and right. Through the window, she could see the warm glow of the living room lamp. Cassandra's hand trembled slightly as she knocked on the door. Ethan opened it, surprise flickering across his tired face. Luke's voice drifted from somewhere inside. "Who is it, Dad?" "It's Miss Price," Ethan called back, his voice careful and measured. "Stay in your room and finish your homework, buddy." "Ethan," Cassandra began, her voice softer than he'd ever heard it. "May I come in, please?" He hesitated, then stepped aside. The small living room felt different now, more intimate than the countless boardrooms where she usually held court. A half-finished puzzle sat on the coffee table, and Luke's schoolbooks were scattered nearby. "I saw your press conference," Ethan said quietly, crossing his arms. "That was unexpected." Cassandra nodded, wringing her hands together, a nervous gesture so unlike her usual commanding presence. "I didn't come here to talk about that. Not really." She took a shaky breath. "I came to apologize. Not with grand gestures or money, but just me, the real me." Ethan's expression remained guarded, but he gestured toward the worn couch. They sat, leaving careful space between them. All my life, Cassandra continued, her voice barely above a whisper, I've used money and power as shields. When you refused my original offer that day, it shook me. Nobody had ever looked at me and seen past the wealth, past the position. Nobody had ever just seen me. A car passed outside, its headlights briefly illuminating the room. Through the thin walls, they could hear Luke humming to himself as he worked on his homework. I've made so many mistakes, she admitted. I hurt you and Luke with my carelessness, with my pride. But being around you both, seeing how you live with such genuine love and faith, it changed something in me. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. I don't want to buy my way into your lives. I want to earn my place, if you'll let me. Ethan shifted uncomfortably, his own eyes showing the internal struggle. Cassandra, our worlds are so different. No, she interrupted gently. That's what I finally understood today. Money, status, power, none of it matters. What you and Luke have, that's real wealth. That's what I want to be part of. Not as a CEO or a millionaire, but just as someone who cares deeply for you both. Her sincerity hung in the air between them. Ethan stood and walked to the window, looking out at the night. You hurt us, he said quietly. I know, Cassandra's voice cracked. I can't undo that, but I'm not asking for forgiveness right now. I'm just asking for a chance to show you who I really am, who I want to be. From down the hall, they heard Luke's door open. Dad, can I have a glass of water? Just a minute, buddy, Ethan called back, his voice warm despite the tension. Cassandra stood, smoothing her jeans nervously. I should go. But Ethan. She reached into her purse and pulled out a simple envelope. This isn't money or a contract. It's just a letter I wrote, explaining everything I feel. Read it when you're ready. She placed the envelope on the coffee table next to Luke's puzzle. I meant what I said at the press conference, but not because I wanted attention or praise. I did it because meeting you and Luke showed me what really matters in life. And it's not what I've spent my whole life chasing. Ethan walked her to the door, his expression softened but still uncertain. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, Cassandra replied quietly. Just know that whatever happens, my heart is here. Not my money or my influence, just my heart. As she stepped into the hallway, Luke's voice called out again. Dad, good night, Ethan, Cassandra whispered. Ethan watched her walk away, her shoulders straight but vulnerable in a way he'd never seen before. The envelope on his coffee table seemed to glow in the lamplight, holding words he wasn't sure he was ready to read. Slowly, he closed the door behind her, the soft click echoing in his chest. He leaned against it for a moment, torn between the hurt of the past and the possibility of tomorrow. Coming, Luke, he called out, pushing himself away from the door. But his eyes lingered on the envelope, and something in his heart shifted ever so slightly. The church basement hummed with activity as volunteers prepared the evening meal for the homeless. Steam rose from large pots of soup while the scent of fresh bread filled the air. Cassandra Price, dressed in jeans and a simple sweater instead of her usual designer suits, stood at a serving station with a ladle in hand. Her perfectly manicured nails were hidden beneath plastic serving gloves as she carefully portioned out bowls of hot soup. Thank you, dear, an elderly woman said as Cassandra handed her a bowl. The warmth in the woman's eyes touched something deep inside Cassandra. You're welcome, she replied softly, meaning it more than she ever had in her corporate life. From the doorway, Ethan watched silently. He'd been volunteering at the soup kitchen for years, but today he hung back, observing the woman who had turned both their lives upside down. Gone was the cold CEO who had once tested him with an impossible choice. In her place stood someone different, someone who smiled genuinely at each person she served, who listened to their stories with real interest. She's been here every day this week, whispered Mrs. Martinez, the soup kitchen coordinator, as she stepped up beside Ethan. Shows up early, stays late, doesn't complain about the work. Whatever changed in that woman's heart, it seems real enough to me. Ethan nodded slowly, watching as Cassandra helped an old man with a cane find a seat. She pulled out his chair, made sure he was comfortable, then brought him an extra roll when he mentioned being especially hungry. Luke tugged at Ethan's hand. Dad, can we go help, please? Ethan hesitated, but Luke's eager face won him over. All right, buddy, let's go. They made their way to the serving line, Luke practically bouncing with excitement. Cassandra noticed them approaching, and her face lit up at the sight of Luke, though uncertainty flickered in her eyes when she met Ethan's gaze. Hi, Miss Price, Luke called out cheerfully. Hello, Luke, she answered warmly. Then more cautiously, "Hello, Ethan. Need an extra pair of hands?" Ethan asked quietly. Relief washed over her face. Always. They worked side by side, falling into an easy rhythm. Luke helped by carrying napkins and silverware to the tables, chatting happily with the elderly guests who delighted in his presence. Ethan couldn't help but notice how naturally Cassandra interacted with his son, how her smile reached her eyes whenever Luke spoke to her. During a quiet moment, Luke returned to their serving station and looked between them thoughtfully. "You know what, Dad? Miss Price belongs with us." Ethan nearly dropped the ladle he was holding. Cassandra's cheeks flushed pink, but she kept her eyes focused on her work, giving them space to process Luke's words. "What makes you say that, buddy?" Ethan asked carefully. Luke shrugged with the simple wisdom of children. "Because she makes people happy now, just like you do. And she looks at us the same way you look at me, like we're special." Ethan felt something shift in his chest, a wall beginning to crumble. He glanced at Cassandra and caught her wiping away a tear with the back of her wrist. The evening continued, and Ethan found himself studying Cassandra when she wasn't looking. She had traded power suits for simple clothes, board meetings for serving the poor. Her designer handbag was nowhere in sight, replaced by an aging apron with the church's logo. But somehow, she seemed more beautiful now than ever before. As the crowd thinned and the evening drew to a close, they worked together cleaning up. Luke had fallen asleep in one of the chairs, his small form curled up peacefully. "Thank you," Cassandra said softly as she wiped down a table near Ethan, "for giving me a chance to show you I've changed." Ethan paused in his work. "Why did you really do it? Give up everything?" She was quiet for a moment, considering her words carefully. "Because I finally understood what true wealth is. It's not in bank accounts or corner offices. It's in moments like these, serving others, seeing Luke smile, earning back your trust." She met his eyes. "I had everything society says makes a person successful, but I was empty inside. Now, for the first time, I feel rich in the ways that matter." Ethan nodded slowly, understanding. He watched as she gathered her coat and purse, preparing to leave for the night. She stopped by Luke's chair, gently draping her scarf over him like a blanket. "He's right, you know," Ethan found himself saying. Cassandra turned, questioning. "About you belonging with us?" he clarified. Maybe we could start with coffee sometime?" The hope that bloomed across her face was like sunrise after a long night. "I'd like that," she said softly. They exchanged quiet goodnights, and Cassandra walked toward the door. Through the window, Ethan watched her begin her solitary walk home under the streetlights. But this time, her steps were lighter, her shoulders unburdened. For the first time since he'd known her, Cassandra Price walked like a woman who had found her way home. Snow fell softly outside the old brick church, coating the steps with a pristine white blanket. Colored lights from the stained glass windows cast rainbow shadows across the powder, creating a magical scene straight from a Christmas card. Inside, Ethan adjusted Luke's clip-on tie, smoothing down the boy's unruly hair with gentle hands. "Ready for the service, buddy?" Ethan asked, his own heart feeling lighter than it had in weeks. Luke nodded eagerly, practically bouncing in his shiny dress shoes. "Do you think Miss Cassandra will come? I saved her a seat next to us." Ethan's hand stilled for a moment. "We'll see, Luke. Remember what we talked about. No pressure, okay?" The church's old wooden doors creaked as other families filed in, their voices mixing with the sound of the organ warming up. Children clutched battery-operated candles, while adults carried the real ones, waiting to be lit during the traditional singing of Silent Night. Outside, Cassandra Price sat in her parked car, watching the happy families climb the church steps. She traded her power suits for a simple blue dress, her usually perfect hair loose around her shoulders. Her hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly, her knuckles turned white. The confidence that had carried her through countless board meetings seemed to have evaporated. "Just go in," she whispered to herself, but fear kept her frozen. What if they didn't want her there? What if her presence ruined their Christmas Eve? The snow continued to fall, dusting her windshield with delicate flakes. Through the swirling white, she saw Ethan step outside onto the church steps. He scanned the parking lot, and their eyes met through her car window. Her heart stuttered. Slowly, deliberately, Ethan walked through the snow toward her car. Cassandra's first instinct was to start the engine and drive away, but something stronger held her in place. He tapped gently on her window. With trembling fingers, she rolled it down. "I'm sorry," she started. "I shouldn't have come. I don't want to intrude on your holiday." "Cassandra?" Ethan's voice was soft but firm. "Come inside. It's cold out here." She shook her head. The congregation. After everything that happened, this is a place of forgiveness, he said simply, opening her car door. And it's Christmas Eve. No one should be alone tonight. He held out his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, she took it. His palm was warm against her cold fingers as he helped her from the car. Together, they walked through the falling snow toward the church entrance. Inside the vestibule, Luke waited impatiently. His face lit up when he saw Cassandra, but he remembered his father's words about not overwhelming her. Instead of running to hug her as he clearly wanted to, he gave a small wave. "We saved you a seat," he said proudly, pointing to the wooden pew where his coat was carefully spread out to reserve the space. The sanctuary glowed with hundreds of candles. Garlands of evergreen wrapped the columns, and a massive Christmas tree sparkled near the altar. The choir, dressed in red robes, arranged themselves in the loft as the last few people found their seats. Cassandra followed Ethan and Luke to their pew, acutely aware of the eyes that turned their way. But instead of the judgment she expected, she saw only gentle smiles. Mrs. Henderson, who volunteered at the soup kitchen with her, gave a warm nod. The baker who supplied communion bread reached out to squeeze her hand as she passed. As they settled into their seats, Luke positioned himself between them. The organ began to play the opening notes of "O Come, All Ye Faithful," and the congregation rose to sing. Cassandra stood, her voice barely a whisper at first, but growing stronger as Luke's clear, childish tenor rang out beside her. The service progressed with familiar carols and readings from Scripture. When it came time for prayers, Cassandra found herself kneeling alongside Ethan and Luke. The wooden kneeler was hard against her legs, so different from the cushioned luxury she was used to. But as she bowed her head, she felt a peace she'd never known in all her years of corporate success. The pastor's words washed over her. "On this holy night, we remember that love came down to earth in the form of a child, that the greatest gifts often come in the most humble packages, that no heart is beyond redemption, and no soul is beyond grace." Tears pricked at Cassandra's eyes. She felt Ethan shift beside her, and then his hand was there, strong and steady, covering hers where it rested on the pew. She didn't dare look at him, but she turned her palm upward, letting their fingers intertwine. The choir began to sing "Silent Night." Ushers moved through the congregation, passing the flame from candle to candle until the sanctuary was filled with dancing light. Luke held his battery-operated candle proudly, while Ethan helped Cassandra light her real one, cupping his hand around the flame to protect it. As the last verse began, Luke slipped his small hand into Cassandra's free one. She looked down at him, this precious child who had somehow found his way into her heart. His face glowed in the candlelight as he whispered, "Now I have a family." The church doors opened, releasing a stream of congregants into the snowy night. Warm light spilled onto the steps as people hugged and exchanged Christmas wishes. Ethan, Luke, and Cassandra emerged last, their faces glowing from the candlelit service. Luke bounded down the steps ahead of them, trying to catch snowflakes on his tongue. His green winter coat was already dusted with white, making him look like a decorated Christmas tree. "It's like God's throwing confetti," he called out, spinning with his arms spread wide. Ethan and Cassandra followed more slowly, watching Luke's joy with matching smiles. The street was peaceful, with Christmas lights twinkling in every window and wreaths hanging on lampposts. Their footsteps crunched in the fresh snow, creating a path through the pristine white blanket. "Be careful, buddy," Ethan called as Luke skipped ahead. "The sidewalk might be slippery under there." Cassandra walked close to Ethan, her expensive wool coat brushing against his worn jacket. She'd changed so much since that first day in her glass tower office. Her face was softer now, her smile genuine. The sharp business suits were gone, replaced by a simple sweater and jeans under her coat. The memory of their first meeting washed over Ethan, her cold demeanor, that shocking proposition, his angry exit. It seemed like a lifetime ago, yet the contrast made this moment even more precious. Here they were, walking home from church together, snow falling around them like nature's blessing. Luke's laughter echoed off the buildings as he tried to make snow angels on the sidewalk. "Dad, Cassandra, come help me." "You'll get all wet, sweetheart," Cassandra called, but her voice was full of affection. "That's the point," Luke giggled, his cheeks rosy from the cold. Ethan watched Cassandra's face as she gazed at his son, their son, in a way he was still coming to understand. The love in her eyes was real, hard-won, through months of change and growth. She'd given up everything, her company, her fortune, her carefully constructed walls, and gained something money could never buy. They passed the diner where it had all started, its windows now decorated with paper snowflakes and tinsel. The closed for Christmas sign hung crooked on the door. Ethan remembered serving coffee there, exhausted but determined, never dreaming his life could change so completely. "Remember that day in your office?" Ethan asked softly, watching his breath form clouds in the cold air. Cassandra tensed slightly beside him. "I try not to," she admitted. "I'm ashamed of how I acted then." "Don't be," Ethan said, surprising them both. He stopped walking and turned to face her. Luke was still ahead, now trying to build a tiny snowman on a nearby bench. "That moment led us here." Snowflakes caught in Cassandra's dark hair, and her eyes shimmered in the glow of the Christmas lights. She looked nothing like the intimidating CEO who had once tried to buy him with money or seduction. This was the real Cassandra, vulnerable, loving, human. "One night or $1 million?" Ethan said quietly, echoing her old proposition. His voice was gentle, free of judgment. "I'd choose this life with you every time." Cassandra's breath caught. Tears welled in her eyes, catching the light like diamonds. She reached for both of them, pulling Luke and Ethan close. Her tears fell freely now, but her smile was radiant. "I never knew," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I never knew life could be this rich." Luke squirmed between them, not understanding the weight of the moment but feeling its warmth. "Group hug," he declared, squeezing them both tight. They stood there in the falling snow, their little family circle complete. Around them, Christmas carols drifted from a nearby house. And somewhere, a church bell tolled midnight. The sound rang clear and sweet across the quiet town, marking the official start of Christmas Day. "We should get inside before we freeze," Ethan said finally, though he was reluctant to break the moment. They walked the last block to their apartment building, their footprints making 3 parallel trails in the snow. The old building steps creaked under their feet, but tonight, even that familiar sound seemed musical. Ethan unlocked their apartment door, and warm air rushed out to meet them. Inside, their small Christmas tree twinkled in the corner, its modest decorations glowing like precious gems. Luke's paper chain garlands draped from the ceiling, and stockings hung from the bookshelf, 3 of them now, where once there had been 2. The apartment was tiny compared to Cassandra's former penthouse, but tonight it felt like a palace. Their laughter echoed off the walls as they shed their wet coats and boots. Luke immediately ran to check if Santa had come early. He hadn't, while Cassandra moved to the kitchen to make hot chocolate. The scene was simple but perfect. Luke's excited chatter, Cassandra warming milk on the stove, the multicolored lights from the tree painting patterns on the walls. Here was a wealth that couldn't be measured in dollars or stock prices. Here was everything that mattered. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Ethan Miller, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.